Well, you don't need me to tell you, that song is a bona fide classic. The Crystals with "Do Run Run," a number 3 hit in 1963. Singing lead on that track is our guest today, Dolores "La" Brooks, whose lead vocals also graced other hits for the girl group like Then He Kissed Me, I Wonder, All Grown Up. You know, the Crystals racked up an impressive number of hits in the early 60s under Phil Spector's tutelage, and Lala is with us on the phone. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, and thanks for having me on.
You know, in going through some of the early publicity photos for the Crystals, I'm looking at you and I'm thinking, my gosh, she's just a kid.
Oh, thank you. No, I started with Crystals when I was 13.
Oh, so you were that young?
Yeah, I was young. I was really like, when Dee Dee's mom was working in my school, and I was in the 7th grade, I was 12 and a half, but by the time I, did the first tour in the summer with the girls, I had turned 13.
Well, that has to be a tremendous amount of pressure for someone that young, and I don't know how you dealt with jealous school kids or anything like that.
Well, what they did was, because we had a hit out there, There's No Other Like My Baby, and so what they did was, quickly they put me in a private school.
Oh, I see.
At 13, I went to a school called Mace on 72nd Street, and then I went to high school, Quintanos. But I was in all private school all the way from the time I was 13. Plus, the kids I went to school with, when I was 13 years old at Mace, they were kids that were soap opera children. Either they were in the soap operas or their parents were. Everybody was professional in some way.
When you suddenly find yourself in a group that's having hit after hit after hit, how does life change for you, or does it change all that much?
Well, I guess it's according to the person and my upbringing. I never changed. I love the fans, I love people, and I think that's the beautiful part of the show business, when you don't let it change you.
Yeah. You know, there's a famous quote from Phil Spector. He allegedly said this to Sonny Bono after listening to the playback to Do Run Run. He said, "That's gold. That's solid gold coming out of that speaker." And all of the Crystals' hits are just masterpieces of songwriting. Were you blown away when you were first presented songs like Do Run Run and Then He Kissed Me?
Well, I did those songs in 63 when I was 15. I don't think I was blown away is because by me starting so young, and Barbara Alston, she was the first lead in the group. She did There's No Like My Baby in Uptown. I wasn't blown away until, I think I'm blown away more now than I was when I was a teenager.
Yeah, because those songs have stood the test of time.
Exactly, and I think that's what blows me away. But when you're a child, I still wanted to play with dolls in a way.
I have to ask you about Phil Spector. Obviously, we know his reputation now, but certainly in the 60s, he had a very wild reputation in the studio as being a taskmaster who was barking orders and waving guns around.
Phil didn't expose me to that. I mean, he would bring a holster. Sometimes he just try to flip the guns around and put them in a pocket. But I really, probably being a teenager, I just thought it was like when my brothers used to put a holster on them and they used to try to put it into the slot.
Right.
But I didn't know that they were real, you know what I'm saying? Because I thought it was like a game that my brothers would play. But as far as Phil being the way that people perceive him to be today, he wasn't like that in the studio. Maybe he'd, be a little bit edgy when he was talking to Sonny Bono.
Right.
Because they were very much, Sonny was always sitting at the control booth, talking with him. But as far as Phil was concerned, I think he knew that I was a teenager. Mm-hmm. And his manners was totally different than what people think of him today.
We just heard the Crystals with Then He Kissed Me. Lala Brooks, our guest today on lead vocals. That song has been covered by a lot of acts over the years. In fact, just a couple of years after the original was released, the Beach Boys did a version of that song. What did you think of their version, Lala?
Yes, I liked it. I heard that they did it very, very well. In fact, Brian from the Beach Boys, these are the favorite singers, was I think me and Ronnie Spector and somebody else. So when I looked at it on the internet, I was happy about that. But I liked the way they did it. They did it very, very good.
Now, I have to ask you about this because there's some confusion over two songs, He's a Rebel and He's Sure the Boy I Love, which are credited to the Crystals, but in fact were recorded by Darlene Love. And how did this whole mess come about?
I always tell the story that Barbara was the lead singer. We were all the original girls, Crystals, and we had a gig to do, and we were riding on the highway. And naturally, all of us would always listen to the radio because we wanted to hear, the top 10. Mm-hmm. And so we listened to He's a Rebel. We didn't think anything about it. And it just was another song to us, and we thought it was done well, but we didn't know who it was. So they were going to say at the end of the segment of the radio guy, he says, number one or something like that, the Crystals, and we, all five of us, because there's five of us when we first started, we turned around and looked at each other like, what? What is this? We had no idea. So now what happens is that we freak out because we go into a gig and we hear this voice under the Crystal name, so naturally we're upset.
Right.
We called our manager, and he got, I guess, he had the big guns and got to find out what went on. And Phil Spector had put Darlene Love underneath He's a Rebel and He's Sure the Boy I Love, which was a problem because when it was on the radio and it became a hit, only He's a Rebel became a hit because I don't think He's Sure the Boy I Loved it that well. But
right.
Barbara had a very light voice from doing There's No Other Like My Baby, the first song. So we get into the studio because now we have to get the record real quick and listen to it. Don't know who the girl is. She was a woman at the time because she was married and had children. Mm-hmm. And we found out that what Phil did, now Barbara has to look at me and say, Lala, the one that has a stronger voice that has to do it on stage, on performances, is you. And I'm only 14 and a half or whatever, so I just had to copy it. And then when He's Sure the Boy I Love came out, it was difficult because I had to copy that, but my accent is more Brooklyn. And when she said, I always dreamed the boy I love would come along, right. I had to change my accent on stage in order to do that. But the Crystals never met Darlene. I was the only one that met Darlene when I was flown out to California to do Run Run, and then He Kissed Me and Little Boy, the other things. And the problem was after that it confused people. Darlene was never Crystal. Phil just put her on that record. And as I thought back, as a child, I remember that I was about 14, and I went to Joe Scandori's office, which was the manager. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, there was a big guy standing there, but when you're a child, you don't understand what's going on.
Right.
He said to me, they were laughing, and he said to Jim, big bouncer-looking guy, he said, Jim, tell Lala what you just did going out to California. So Jim says, very like the mafia kind of guy,
right.
said, he says, Lala, I just went out and I ran Phil around the table. You've got to get a record out on the Crystals. You've got to get a record out. What happened was Phil, when we were recording in New York, we started Phil. Phil started us.
Right.
There was no Darlene Love. There was no Righteous Brothers, not even the Ronettes. We started Phil in New York. And when Phil moved the company out there, that's when everything went crazy.
Right.
So when Phil moved out there, we still had a contract with him. We're thinking, okay, well, naturally, with the contract, we're still going to record. So he put this girl underneath there, this woman, Darlene Love, and he was breaking sort of the contract, which was a terrible thing for us,
yeah.
for him to do, because then Darlene took it to another level. She got popular from under the Crystal name. She started claiming that she made and did the lead on to Do Run Run because I wasn't on the scene to defend it and just came back to do it now.
We're talking to Lala Brooks today on the Vintage Rock and Pop Shop, lead singer on such Crystals classics as Do Run Run and Then He Kissed Me. We just heard All Grown Up there. And Lala, I want to give you a chance to play one of your favorite Crystals tracks.
I think my favorite would be I'm a Woman in Love. It's on a new release that Phil licensed Sony with, that they got it from the I guess the can or whatever, but it's called I'm a Woman in Love. And for me to sing that song with that, the way I twist the lyrics and sang the lyrics, it sounds that I'm an older woman, and I just love that song. So if you could ever pick it up, it's called I'm a Woman in Love.
It's like a dream come true.
By the way, where can people catch up with you if they want to, befriend you? I guess on Facebook, obviously.
Sure, I'll befriend them, and who's to say that we won't have dinner or lunch or because I'm crazy like that. Because as I say, I love my fans, I love the people. In fact, I feel so funny to call them fans is because it's just a friendship with other people, which is so beautiful. I call them, and we all have the same, background when it comes to, paying bills, problems, and
sure.
Sometimes I listen to them and we just chat like normal people would do. So I call them, I have dinner with them, and we laugh, we talk, and it's cool. You know, some of the artists in the business and friends of mine, if they're not on stage, they're not the normal person. But I'm just as normal as I can be. I go out looking like a ragamuffin. My neighbors, I cook for them.
Well, I have to say, I mean, again, on Facebook, I saw your picture, and it's a recent picture, and I said, my gosh, she looks like a kid.
Yeah.
So whatever you're doing, health-wise, is working out for you, that's for sure.
Yeah, thank God for that. I'm telling you, I must tell you this quickly. I met Cher when I lived in Vienna. She played one of the places in Vienna. And Cher, I'm very close with. I know her well. And she asked her assistant to ask me, what surgeon did I use? What plastic surgeon? I said, listen, I can't even afford sometimes a plastic cup. I said, a plastic surgeon. And so Debbie, which was her assistant, said, oh, my God. She said, Lala, Cher's going to be pissed to know that you didn't use a surgeon.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us and also clearing the air regarding who sang what on those Crystals releases because, there's some misinformation out there, and we wanted to get the right story and the true story on the show today. And, of course, we've been talking to Lala Brooks, who sang lead on, so many classic songs from the Crystals, enough to get them into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and hopefully that'll happen someday.
And thank you for having me.